All right. Well, thank you for joining. I am recording this, so we can go ahead and put it up on YouTube. Anybody else that wants to see this. Welcome to, for me, the first InfosecDC meetup. I took this meetup over about a month ago or so. It was being turned off. It had been just links to other webinars and stuff, and it was mostly during the day. So I figured I'd keep it with the same idea of doing some short meetups in the middle of the day, kind of lunchtime, just do some quick stuff on InfoSec. We'll see where it goes. We'll see if it works out. If anybody has ideas, speakers they'd like to hear, if they'd like to speak, please feel free to reach out to me on Meetup or on Twitter. I'm other DevOps Gene. You can get in touch with me and just let me know, give me your ideas, or just chat me right here. And I'll try to set something up, but we're looking for as many speakers, new speakers, experienced speakers, people that have interesting jobs in InfoSec, people who have what they think are commonplace jobs in InfoSec, anything around it. We're just trying to, kind of share some knowledge between colleagues and peers. So thank you all for joining. So with that, let me go ahead and get started and introduce Phil Coppersmith. Phil works at Steampunk with me. He is an ISSO, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what that is. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask them or send them in chat, whichever is more comfortable, and I'll pass them on to Phil. All right, Phil. So why don't you tell us what's an ISSO?
Sure. Hey, Gene. An ISSO is an Information System Security Officer. This is a role that basically you're the security point of contact on a particular system. So, it's everything from the extremely mundane, checking on patches, documentation is a big one, right? Usually ISSO is tasked with creating the system security plan, which those of you who are not familiar is a document usually about this thick, we're talking hundreds of pages, that describes, the who, what, where, when, why of your system, and also how the system is being secured via security controls. List 800, special publication 853 is the tome that is used to basically as the boilerplate for the system security plan. And so, there's a method on how you control selection and stuff like that. I mean, the NIST RMF spells out how to do that, and along with the additional policies and procedures that you'll get. So, that's part of it too, is writing all that up, collecting all that information from your various collaborators and stakeholders, and writing that up into a document that, not many, so what I was told was ideally it's written at like a 7th grade level, and that it should be written in such a way that if anybody needed to know about your system, they could just pick it up and read it. So, you got to kind of write it broadly, but also you can't be too technical in it either, because, lay people may pick it up and just not understand what you're talking about. So, I mean, now, I've been working in NatSec, national security, so either DoD or DHS for the majority of my InfoSec career now. So I think the idea there being like, if there's a crisis and somebody needs to step up and know what's going on with your system, they can get relatively quickly acclimated to it. So that's the idea behind it. Now, I know if you're, working at a lesser civilian agency or something like that, that's not as mission critical, that, all right, maybe we don't need that level of effort on that, but it's still important to know how it's being secured and how it's done, and then how frequently things are updated, stuff like that.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of people working at on DoD projects or DHS projects as well that don't feel that their website that they're maintaining or whatever that they're protecting the security of feels like national security or feels like mission critical. So right up until the point where someone says, hey, turns out we were using SolarWinds, and we need you to start tell us what's exposed, what's here, what's that, right? I mean, that's really what you're there for, is for the, documenting how do we react in those situations, what's at risk, that type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a great point there, right? Where a bunch of people were caught unaware with that. But some executives at some agency, and also in private sector too, was like, hey, are we using SolarWinds? And they're going to ask, I mean, hopefully the CISO or the CIO knows, but you never know, right? So it's important that somebody knows that. And then, in that situation, I imagine a data call would happen, and just an extreme call for information as quickly as possible, so the management can make the correct decision. And then, and we're also talking about risk here, right? I mean, that's part of the job as well, as managing risk on your system. So that's through your security controls, or just working with system personnel to make sure, that you're managing risk accordingly. So when stuff like SolarWinds, or what's the new one? Visaya, right? I think it's the new hotness that's on the street.
Visaya, right.
Stuff like that gets that you work with the system team, or in some cases it might be you directly directing the system team, like, hey, this is what we got to do to mitigate or fix this, or we need to take this offline, it's such a big risk, and then you're going to talk to the system owners and those to be like, okay, well, what else can we do to get similar function or functionality, or we need to tell our customers that this functionality is going to be disabled and so it can be fixed, and how to communicate that out and stuff like that, so that's just part of the gig. So.
Cool. So Larry was asking a question, what were you doing before your current ISSO position? Were you, was this you one of the hoodie on, dark room, hacking away at systems? Were you completely compliance and all that? I mean, it sounds like this is a lot of documentation, collecting information, and a lot less of the Hollywood hacker type security, right? So what did you do beforehand? How'd you get into this?
Okay. Well, I started my career in human resources, actually. I was a poli-sci major, and I didn't really do a lot of future planning after I got out of school. It was just kind of like, well, I got my degree, now what? So I came back. So, I mean, I was basically raised like in Loudoun County, right? So I moved home after school, and just was kind of temping and stuff like that. And I ended up in an HR job as a recruiter. And it was for like a small IT company, and the person they had recruiting was leaving to go on maternity leave. And they're like, well, we need somebody to do something here, so why don't you come work for us? I was like, okay. Steady job, benefits, like all kinds of stuff I didn't know what was, right? And then so anyway, I worked there for a while. I became basically the generalist type of person. They set up, I mean, they had a client as the State Department, right? And they were doing all kinds of IT engineering for them, and management decided that they needed to stand up that kind of technology, not at the level the State Department was using, but hey, we should probably do something here that, here at the company. I mean, just there's an email server and a file server and a couple other things, but they're like, okay, well, we need like a security person here technically. So how about you? You're not really doing too much. So they taught me, how to do, add people to Active Directory and stuff like that. I take the tapes home. I lived close by, so the backup tapes, right? I just grab them on Fridays or whatever and just bring them home with me in case there was a disaster or something. The building burned down or whatever. So just kind of got started like that. And then the company won some work at the SBA, and it was for IT security for this one system. And they had a problem with the project manager. I guess they only bid half-time project manager for this role. So they had like a guy who was a legit pro, he was only there 20 hours a week. So the hours he wasn't there, the client would like come and be like, hey, you got to do all this extra work. And they're like, well, yeah, but the PM's not here, and they're like, well, we don't care. We need this. It's important now. So the manager was like, listen, you're cheap. So we'll stick you there. You can be the PM full time. We'll only bill them half time, and that way you're there and, you do that. Right. So, anyways, a team of 3 people, like a text me, a policies me, and then like a utility person who kind of write reports and stuff, or do whatever. They're like, hey, I need help with this. Okay, I'll come and help you. Anyway, so that was my first real taste of InfoSec, right? Was the policy SME. She was a bit of eccentric, we'll say. She had like a health condition and stuff. And so one day she was supposed to come to a meeting and then she didn't show up. And I had heard that like she had left early because she was having wasn't feeling well, and then wasn't answering phone calls or anything. I'm like, oh no, right? Like what's going on? So, trial by fire PM experience. Anyway, they were working on a modernization project and they needed somebody to write SSP and REST controls and stuff like that. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm the man here, right? So I guess I'll do it. And that's kind of where I started getting my feet wet on it. I was like, oh, okay. Like, it makes sense, right? Okay, what is the control asking? Okay, and then how do I do it? How frequently do we do it? Who's doing it? Who's responsible for doing it? Stuff like that. And then just keep going all the way all throughout. And then talking to the text me and being like, hey, what does this mean? What do they do here? Does this make sense? Stuff like that. And then working again with the implementation team who was doing the, putting the technology in place, right? And being like, hey, what does this mean? What's this? That kind of stuff, right? And so after a little while, I was kind of getting the hang of it. And that's, I was like, oh, okay, this is good. Like I can write and I just need to get better at this stuff, but I can do this, right? And I knew how much the text me was making, so I was like, man, I can make the money she's making, right? Like I just gotta go get my CISSP and be on my way, right? And so that put me on the path. So I went from HR generalist to part-time PM to just InfoSec guy and compliance, right? Because like I said, I was a poli-sci major, so writing wasn't that big a deal for me. Unlike some of my technical brethren, right, who would just absolutely abhor writing. So that put me on the path.
Do you think that's actually helped you more in this type of role, that you're more comfortable with the writing and you've picked up the technical pieces by fire, or you think you think if you had a chance to go back and prep to actually aim for this position from the get-go, would you have spent more time learning the technical stuff and kind of what would you have done? What's the background, the optimal background for an ISSO?
I mean, if I was to design like a bachelor's program for it, I guess, definitely getting the writing helps. Knowing how to write, understanding how to structure paragraphs and stuff like that definitely help. I know, in tech that isn't exactly a strong suit for a lot of people. People don't like writing.
Nope.
Like one thing I do like about the sort of DevOps revolution is this idea that using wikis and using just collecting things together to make what you need, right? Rather than having to, get someone with an English degree to put this all together for you, right? I think that's cool. That's really great. And collaborative as well. Like anybody can do it, right? I mean, that's cool. A colleague, did a thing on markup language, which I was like, oh man, it's better than the tools we've had to use to write the SSPs are absolutely awful. I mean, aside from Microsoft Word, but it's that helps. And I think it does help too, right? Like my degree helped me realize, just try to put everybody's perspectives in order, right? I mean, that's essentially kind of what political science teaches you is, all right, here's the issue, here are the factions, what does each side want, kind of thing, right? So I think that helped here.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about the writing, though, that it's not popular in tech. I would have sworn growing up that I would never, ever write, that English was the most useless of my high school classes because I knew I wanted to go into computers. I find myself doing an awful lot of writing documentation, writing positions, explaining to people in an email that they can pass on to their bosses who are less technical than them. Here's what we're doing, or here's why we want to do this, and I think you're right. I think it, gets overlooked quite a bit, but it's, far more important than any of us technical people would have wanted it to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then like I said, I know a lot of people in InfoSec kind of come up through the engineering ranks, right? I mean, being maybe you're a system engineer, network engineer, that kind of thing. I mean, maybe a programmer, or I mean, a couple of guys I've worked with, came up through help desk, right? Like, they were doing help, and they're like, "Oh man, this sucks having to go fix somebody's email at 3 a.m. There's got to be a better way to do this, right?" So they come up that way. So I think it would make me stronger if I had the kind of basics of IT stuff, right? I mean, I wish I understood networking like some guys do, right? Or how to calculate an IP CIDR table and stuff. I don't know. I ask other people for that, or I try to figure it out, or that kind of thing, right? And understand how that all works. That would definitely help. Yeah, and then the security knowledge itself, to me, that seemed the most intuitive, right? I mean, the analogy we use is a house, right? Like, think about your house, think about all the things that are used to secure your house, right? I mean, you got doors and windows. Are there locks on the doors and windows? Are there doors and windows? Stuff like that. I mean, what is your house built on? Is it built on a swamp? Is it built, on the prairie? I mean, what are the materials used to build your house? Where is your house located? Is it in a busy urban place? Is it in the middle of nowhere? Stuff like that. And then just applying those same principles to, an IT system. It's the same thing. It's just sometimes the locks are electronic, right? Rather than,
How much of your time do you feel is doing like actual security, like guiding people and helping them secure their system versus say compliance, just measuring like, did we meet all the requirements, regardless of whether it's something that's helping us or something that just doesn't apply much, or basically, sometimes it's helping risk, sometimes it's really just doing the documentation so you can get somebody else off your back. How much do you think it splits between those?
Well, to be generous, right? I guess we'll say 70-30, right? 70% is compliance and measurement and checking, and the 30% in actual like security, doing security stuff, right? I mean, so I'll say, all right, so my most current ISO position was for a cloud-based GSS, right? And a GSS is a general support system, or a system of systems, if you will, right? So it's a big system that provides things, and then other systems will inherit or leverage those from the big system, right? So since I was a big system that had a lot of systems in it, I had to be more cognizant of what vulnerabilities were happening with the system. And to be honest, that's doing that. So scans, I got really good at doing vulnerability scanning. I mean, that's the tool security used, right? To understand, what's going on with your system, how to fix flaws, where the weak points are in your system. And that's the tool that we use to go and tell the system teams, like, here's where your flaws are, here's where we need to look to fix this kind of stuff. I will say probably the best joy I've had in the job is when the scanners would show critical vulnerabilities, and I'd go and I'd alert the system team that, hey, scanners showing these are criticals. What can we do about it? I mean, here's what the scanner says to do to fix it. What can you guys do? And then everybody mobilizing quickly to be like, yeah, okay, it's a critical. All right, here's how we can do it. Here's how quickly we can fix it. That kind of stuff. It's fixed now, but there was an F5, remote code execution vulnerability that came out in May, and I got the scans back and saw that, and they like leapt into action really quickly. Had a plan together, like it came together in hours, right? Like, all right, here's what this is. How fast can you guys fix it? Oh no, we're gonna have to take these offline and do it, but we can't do it all at the same time, right? We're gonna have to stagger it. Okay, cool. Oh, hey, look, here's a mitigation we found. Can you guys, oh yeah, we applied the mitigation, and then ran scan again and was like, oh, well, the critical's gone since you guys put the mitigation in place. And they're like, great, well, we still got to update the F5, so let's keep the schedule. And so we get, yeah, that kind of stuff. So it was cool when that happened,
Yeah, that actually sounds like, some of my experiences with security. We often, I mean, I even put it in the write-up for this talk about the, a lot of times the ISSO or security is seen as the preventers of, of progress, right? Here, we're just here to stop you from doing anything. The security side says we're here to stop you from doing anything wrong. The developers kind of more of the impression that you're just here to stop us from doing anything. But I guess a lot of times though, when I actually get into it and find it, is that the developers and the development teams, project teams are really anxious to fix things as long as they're told proactively or told, hey, we just found this, what can we do? Or this is serious, as opposed to, here's a spreadsheet with 100 different findings ranging from anywhere from serious to completely mundane. Fix them all and get back to me, So I think a lot of the times the approach that the ISO, the approach that security takes dictates a lot of how engaged, I guess, the development teams are. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like I said, in that early job I had, like that's when I really understood the reality of, security versus ops versus everybody else, right? Like it was that sort of adversarial kind of thing, and it sucked. They want to make changes, they want to do cool stuff, and then they didn't invite security to it until they're like, all right, we're 3 days away from kickoff, security's here now, can you guys just approve everything? It's like, no. Right? Like, how do we know this isn't going to break everything? Like, what are you doing? Like, why weren't we invited? And then one time they did, and the text me like was pivotal, right? They're like, man, we want to do this thing. How do we do it? He's like, you're going to need this kind of hardware. You're going to need this and this, and you're going to have to do these kind of things, right? And they're like furiously scribbling everything down, right? Like, oh yes, yeah, that sounds good, yeah. So
that's a lot of what DevSecops and agile approaches are about, is getting everybody involved early on. And there's never enough security people to go around to have people embedded with every team and everything, but at least inviting them to the early planning meetings so that they can, at the beginning of the project, say, you want to do what, versus the very end, right? When you said like 3 days before release, and they say, you did what?
What do you mean? We've been working on this for months. It's like, well, why did you invite security at the last minute?
Right.
I mean, that's just poor planning, right? I will say, like, I like that approach better, where, I also like the idea of like the sort of the paved road concept, right? Of like, okay, we create the environment and we put rails up so that people can't just go and be, let them do whatever they want, right? I think that's a great idea. And I think that thing comes up, I've noticed a lot, where okay, so this is a very mundane thing, but just keeping track of what assets you got in the cloud, right? Like the dev teams have keys to go and just spin up VMs. They want to test something out. Okay, great. I think that's great. I think that's a great idea. Plus, it's easier than ever, right, to do that stuff. But what happens is we'll run a report, where we're just seeing what's in there, and you'll find a lot of just bad behavior stuff, like, VMs that have been stopped for months that have been, what are you doing? Why didn't you just destroy it? I mean, what's the point of holding on to it? That kind of stuff. Or things that have the same name. There's like 10 different hosts with the same name. The different IPs, but it's like, well, how did that happen? Or tagging is really important to especially when I was the GSS ISO, right? Because we had hosted and managed systems. Like managed meaning like we took care of a lot of security stuff for them, and hosted meaning those guys ran their own stuff. But a lot of things were just mistagged or not tagged at all. so we didn't really know what we're responsible for and stuff like that, right? And luckily working with the system team, we got that. It's not all the way fixed, but it's a lot better than it was, right? So just stuff like that, just a lot of like bad behavior stuff, or just it. I blame laziness, but really in reality, it was probably like, okay, they're just moving quickly and they didn't have time to do that. So
yeah, and sometimes it's just you don't know what's important and what's not, right? To a
right.
dev team, it seems like such a minor thing. Who cares if it's tagged right? But to you, that's down the road, even to the dev teams down the road, they realize, boy, that would have been really easy if we had tagged it right the first time. So
right. And it's important to know because I got to know what's in my scan boundary, right? Like, I mean, okay, so the system we were in was highly dynamic, and so we had to update it like all the time, right? Like things are coming up and down. But if the report has all the things mistagged, I don't know what's real, what's not real. We get into fights with the system team where it's just like, hey, can you guys, we're updating the inventory. Can you confirm this is correct or not? What is this? What the hell is it? Why is this on here? What, we told you not to. It's like, how did I know? Like, this is your report. You're supposed to be updating it and maintaining it, right? Ensuring it's correct. They're like, oh yeah. It's just like, seems like silly fight, but it's important, right? And process improvement is part of the job, right? And that's part of it too, right? Like, hey, this is a great report. We all like it, but there's some problems with it. Can you guys fix it? And they're like, yeah, okay, we understand. Yeah, all right, that makes sense. And same thing, right? I mean, it's important to know what's in your boundary, right? Because that's what you're responsible for. And if you're scanning things that aren't in your boundary, well, that's just a waste of everybody's time, right? So anyway, it all feeds together, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sure people got a lot of questions.
Yeah,
Manny was just asking, how do you manage your day as an ISSO? I guess what's your day like?
It depends on the time of the month, honestly. Where I work, we have a requirement that you have to get your audit log reviews done by the 15th of the month. So if we're in the front half of the month, then I'm working on that. And usually we have monthly scans scheduled. They're supposed to come in, between the 5th and the 10th of the month. So I'm kind of, just watching my email for that. That's important. The other thing is also just reviewing tickets. I love Jira. I really love Jira. I haven't used it other places I've worked before, but we use Jira and it's fantastic. I love it. Because I mean, from a security guy, right? Like, artifacts are critical for what we do, right? And proof that the thing is that we say that we're doing is done. And what I like about, I guess now I'm pitching Jira, but it's easy. It's easy to update. It's easy to write quick sentences. People write comments. Hey, what's the status of this? Rather than people having to chase people down via email and stuff. It's like, okay, I know the admins and the dev teams are all using Jira, so I know they're monitoring it. So I know I'm going to get something right. So that's good. And then same thing. I'm watching my email. Like, I'm looking for updates on this particular vulnerability. What's going on? That kind of stuff. So yeah, doing that. And then also it's again, what time of the month, and then what time of the year, right? Where I know I kind of spent the front half of this talking about documentation, but in the controls, you write that there's a frequency of which we review the controls, right? So some controls you wouldn't check very often, like physical controls, like how often are the, door locks or the cameras at your data center like updated, right? Like, no, I mean, they're in place. The assessor saw they're in place. All right, we'll check it every 5 years or something like that, right? But stuff like, like SI2 or RA5, which is kind of the scan SI2 flaw remediation, right? So, it's remediating flaws. How often are you patching? Are you patching? Just working on that kind of stuff. That stuff's checked all the time. I mean, same thing for the AU controls and stuff like that. It's audit controls, the logging usually, right? Stuff like that. The frequency of that is either constantly or once a week or once a month, or so you got to evaluate where you're at with that. Documentation reviews. Where we work, we have SOPs written for every control family that we're responsible for. So those need to be reviewed at least annually. And it's better to don't do them all in 1 month, stagger them throughout the year, right? So you're not doing that. So yeah.
Andre had a question here. It says, I see most jobs for ISSO want you to have your CISSP, like you mentioned you went for that. But do you think that having a CISP plus helps as well, since it's also a IAT3 and IAM2, and you understand along the same lines, security controls and implementation? So what I guess, where's certification stand in helping you get ready for this and making sure you
I'm a big proponent of certifications. Like I said, I came from a non-security, non-technical background, and that's what's really helped me get better at my job. The recruiters love it. The feds require it in the contracts, right? I know that all the different positions have qualifications attached to each position, and usually certifications are an easy shorthand way to go, oh yeah, this person has this certain baseline of knowledge. I mean, they passed the test, whether or not you retained it after the test, I mean, that's another question. But
at least it's a good baseline, like you said, right?
Right, exactly. You got the piece of paper saying, yeah, I knew enough to pass the test.
At least at one time I knew this stuff.
Right, exactly. So they're good. I agree that I think the chase around them is silly. Having to pay that fee every year, having to go to the CEUs. Like, I think the intentions are good. They just can be complicated. I mean, if you're busy. I mean, I got a life outside of work too, right? I mean, I got a 2-year-old, and I like to travel and have fun. So going and watching lectures, on, I don't know, whatever, AWS or new vulnerabilities or two tools or stuff like this isn't exactly the best way to spend your fun, but it can be, so it's important. And it's very important to stay up to date, especially in this field. Things are changing all the time. The adversaries won't stop. Security researcher is a real thing now, and they're finding new stuff and self-publishing all the time. So it's important to stay up to date with that,
Larry, did you have a question? But you jumped on a second ago.
I'm sorry. Actually, I had like several questions, like a whole bunch of questions, but I don't want to just cut the whole thing. I actually asked one of them in the text, but my question is, I know that the knowledge is important, but I also know that your network connections with other people is also important. So when you compare knowledge versus connection, which one is actually more important to get hired as an ISSO?
So in terms of getting hired, having knowledge is important. I've been through probably at least 24 ISO or security control assessor interviews now. And the knowledge portion is usually where things get held up for the interviewer, right? Again, it depends on what level of ISO you're looking for. If you're looking for a senior experienced one, well, they're going to have some opinions on some things, right? So that's a way to evaluate the quality of the candidate, is if they have, I guess, whether or not they're good opinions, but if they understand the question you're asking and then having enough to apply their own level of analysis to it, then that's oh yeah, this guy knows what he's doing, right? Kind of thing. As far as connections can be extremely good, right? I mean, so when you're an ISO and you're kind of like, you got your system and you got your assignment and you're kind of like, just, here you go, good luck, you got to do your job. I have found it's very important, especially when you go to a new client and you're really not sure about how things work around there. It's good to make and forge connections with people who either have long-time institutional knowledge, that kind of thing. It's very important to understand how things work where you're at. So that can be good. But to me, it's more knowledge first to get in the door, and then you forge the connections and relationships. And then same thing, even a couple years removed from where you're at, maybe you make really good relationships with people. They turn into friendships, or just professional relationships too. Like, I don't know, I'm a contractor. Luckily Steampunk's been great so far. But you know, there comes a time where it comes to the end of the contract and the company you're at didn't win recompete. So, you know, you got to go find yourself your next gig, right? And if you maintain those contacts, I mean, it might be, you never know, man. A couple years later, somebody's a Fed now and they're looking for someone and you want to go work for the federal government, they got a spot, they can help you out, you know, or they're working at some contract at DISA or wherever. And oh yeah, man, we're down like 10 people. We could really use you, you know, stuff like that. So that definitely helps as well. So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really favor one or the other, but you know, like I said, to get your foot in the door, knowledge, 1, relationships, 2. And then when you're
Thank you.
there, 50-50. Yeah, you're welcome.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we're over time a little bit, but thank you everyone for coming. I am going to post this on YouTube. And for the Steampunk folks, we'll go ahead and post this internally so they can watch it again. But Phil, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. If anybody has other questions, feel free to reach out and meetups and I'll pass them on to Phil. I can get a hold of them and get you some answers. So thanks for everyone for coming and I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Phil.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.